Morning, folks. Richard, how are you? I don't even know who you are. You're not on. Okay. Don't we have another Arctic game?
I guess we know.
Well, anyway, let's go. Did you get that press release? I don't get it out. I haven't really spoken to him. I've exchanged a couple of emails with him. He just got this pretty serious diagnosis that's manageable, but he just needs to start managing. Very close to that's all. So, he's been 3 weeks thinking that he has pneumonia. They don't have that something.
Thank you, Beth, for that wonderful piece on this great snowy spring day. I'm Jim Black, and I'm your service leader today. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And we'd like to acknowledge here the First Nation people who are the original inhabitants of this region, including the Ho-Chunk, the Menominee, the Potawatomi, and the several First Nations of Wisconsin. It is our custom to invite visitors and people who have not been here in a while to stand, introduce themselves if they feel comfortable. So anybody like to stand and introduce themselves and just say who they are?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Sandy Purdy and I live in Cedarburg. I am up here with my friend Lauren Simpson and she is part of this group. So she asked me to join you.
Oh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay. Very good. See, get this. We're trying something new this time, and that you notice that the hymnals are out in the new cart. Hopefully you grabbed one. The plan here is that as you come in, you grab a hymnal, and and then as you leave, you put it back. Very simple. And that's going to save a lot of work for the vergers and the other folks. So that's what we're trying to do here. I'm not sure if this is getting feedback or not. Okay. After the service, join us in the gathering room for some coffee and refreshments. And after about 15 minutes, the chimes will ring for talk back. And we'll meet over here with Art, and they will tell us something more about their message, and we will be able to ask questions about their message. And I'm looking forward to that, to be enlightened. On the back of the order of service are announcements, and if there are any additions or modifications, Terry will bring the mic around, and please identify yourself for those at home when you make the announcement. Here we go.
Mary Smythe. Judy Drew, who is chair of the board of Doris Shakespeare, has sent around an email to a number of people, which I'd like to share with you. And the point of it is that they desperately need housing for the people who will be at Doris Shakespeare. She says, actors and most theater folks make great tenants. They work all night and sleep all day. It's entirely possible their hosts will never notice their presence. Weekly payment is $100 to $200 a week and is negotiable if the host requires more. So please reach out to Doris Shakespeare if you have some space and could use a little bit of extra income. Thank you.
Well, this is sufficient. Thank you. All right. Our speaker today is Art Kopishki. Welcome back. Art has a youthful connection to our fellowship. Art was a young member of the UUFDC's, Art was attending high school here in Door County. And it's an honor to have Art speaking here today. Art is quite talented and a very busy individual. Last night at the Gene Widener Theater, Art's play, You Don't Deserve to Die, was read. The play was described as, quote, an absurd look at the lives of 5 liberal arts students struggling to run a vegan co-op amid differences in philosophy and food ethics. But their efforts to change the world are thwarted at their fatal Earth Day party. I want to read this play. This sounds like a fun, enlightening play. And that's just one of several that Art has written. So, opening words, a place of belonging and caring. It is not by chance that you arrive here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more. A desire for a place belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. To start the service, the chalice lighting. Hymn? Oh, I don't have a hymn. Hymn 38, sorry. Thank you. Now the chalice lighting. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of love and death, symbol of truth and freedom, we strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. Please stand and body your service, body your spirit for instant affirmation and doxology. So, we gather together to seek knowledge and wisdom, to explore freely the vast reaches of mind and spirit, to celebrate within a caring community those truths, ancient and modern, which give meaning and direction to our lives. And this is the time in our service where we share joys and concerns. Joy, if you want to share something that's lifted you up, or a concern, by sharing you might lighten your burden. Do keep in mind that this service is being broadcast live and recorded. So do not share something about somebody else unless you have permission. And again, Terry will bring this mic around.
Well, I just heard the other day, a little bird told me that Chris Weidenbachers are going to be celebrated at the volunteer celebration for the annual Golden Heart Awards. He's a nominee on Wednesday, April 19th at Stone Harbor, and there's a dinner involved. And I have the information if you're interested in going. And I'm going to be going, so please join me.
Good morning. I have a quick joy and concern. A friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, lost her 24-year-old son quite suddenly about a week and a half ago, and she's having a tough time with it. So if you could lift her and her family in your prayers, that would be nice. Now, my quick joy is very silly. Every time I come to church here, I get to pick a color for and I just love it. It's like, what do I want today? So I want to thank you for, I don't know if I'm supposed to, if there's a hierarchy. Thank you.
My joy, among many others today, is reflecting on how welcoming this community was to us 16 years ago, and that the RE program started to accommodate Art and their little brother Simon. And I know many people in this room were teachers in that RE program, and I'm very grateful to all of you and the nurturing of the ethical development of our fine children.
Lynn leads a special joy that Art is here. I'm going to show the back room. The transformation was quite amazing when they led their youth group to jam sessions and some spiritual sessions, but it was just a joy. It still is. So we'll take a tour later.
Hi, I'm Phil Freistad. A little over a month ago, asked for positive thoughts, positive energy, prayers, which is a great combination, by the way. I'm going to have open heart surgery, which I did on the 1st of March. So from the bottom of my new improved heart, thank you all for your support, cards, letters, some meals. And this is also a special week for my wife and I. This Friday will be our 50th wedding anniversary. So I like to keep things an adventure in our marriage, and it looks like I've done it.
Phil, it's good to see you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Yesterday, I remembered my mother and my husband. It was both of their birthdays on the same day. So my mother would be very old right now if she was still with me. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now it's time for our offertory. If you could please be generous to help support the fellowship.
Hello, I'd like to start with a reading. After the great death, the chamber dusted off its rust, like a fox dog dusting off flies. The body that housed this chamber is subject to the natural laws. It functioned. It almost always did. There were hiccups many a time, but the natural laws enslaved the body. The laws of productivity, of heartless capitalism. This lawless chamber housed love, housed suffering, housed trauma, and housed healing. This anomalous chamber is made of materials both fragile and unbreakable, unexplainable. The vulnerable queer chamber cared for all of the rest, all of the lice, all the million locked windows it sprouted every day. Now the chamber, exercised of rust and rain, receptive to so much light, so much air getting in through locked windows. The window panes have been banished. The foxdog swirled in simple ecstasy. The rust and the nails and the panes fell off. Many months have passed since the trees moved in. All they do now is sprout yellow flowers and entwine their branches. Foxdogs come and sleep in the afternoons, and the psychedelic blue velvet birds make sleazy groans all evening. People of the dunia wonder what goes on inside these strange chambers. So much impatient music, peaceful yellow halos surrounding its breath boundaries. The chamber now cares for the body. The chamber has abolished walls and borders. The chamber now bursting with yellow flowers, generations of foxdogs and tree folks, has become air itself, like the blanket of air that caresses a blue planet. It swims with the one who brought in this queer light and queer wings, which are songs. If you would join me, standing as you are able, in singing hymn 313, Oh, What a Piece of Work Are We.
Now we'll just take a moment of quiet to clear our minds before Art's presentation.
Hello.
Hi.
So wonderful to see your faces again. It's wonderful to be back. I'm sure I look a little different from last time you saw me. I have a different name, but it's wonderful to see all of your faces again and be reacquainted. My name is Art Kapishki. I am non-binary, and this is a phrase that I struggle, wrestle, contend with every day. For context, non-binary identity exists within the gender binary. The gender binary is the Western concept enforced by Europeans on the rest of the world through colonization, that there are only two gender options, man and woman, and that those two genders must correlate with the sex that doctors determined you to be at birth. So in simple terms, being non-binary means that you do not identify just as a man or just as a woman. Someone who is non-binary might feel like a mix of genders or like they have no gender at all. I'm sorry. A gender fluid person, someone whose gender changes over time, might identify as a girl sometimes and genderless other times. There are many different ways to exist as non-binary, and the truth of the matter is that probably no one will ever understand the complexities of your gender as much as yourself, although I would argue this is true of cis people as well. Cis simply means that you identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. I'll explain more on this later. Non-binary is not androgyny, it is not bisexuality, it's an identity that we all have. I'm non-binary. I was assigned female at birth. I was raised as a woman and oftentimes present as what society would describe as feminine. I wear makeup, I have curves, I wear clothing that sometimes accentuates those curves, and even when I try my very hardest, my personal androgynous style seems to fall neatly into a very accepted androgynous woman's style. Think Annie Hall or Twiggy. While gender expression, the way that you dress, the activities that you partake in, does not determine your gender in any way, I'm constantly frustrated with the way that I am perceived, because even though I like the way I look, I feel affirmed in the way that I present myself to the world, people don't always see me as such. People don't always see me as enough of a diversion from what I was assigned at birth to necessitate transness. I blame women's fashion, as it has made it incredibly difficult to defeminize yourself due to the acceptance of androgyny as a popular aesthetic in women's fashion. Think again, Annie Hall Twiggy. Many non-binary people will opt for gender-affirming surgery or undergoing hormone treatment if finances and health allow, and that's important because oftentimes finances and health do not allow. I personally have not opted to do so, and at the moment I have no plans to. I like my body. I don't see it as a woman's body, but I know that the majority of people in my life, even those closest to me, even those trying their hardest, will default to seeing me as a woman. My dear, brilliant friend, H. Conley, a non-binary journalist, is someone who has opted for top surgery, and I'd like to read an excerpt of their personal essay that they wrote. Quote, I came out as trans in June 2019. My parents asked me to go to therapy. Peter had never worked with a trans or non-binary patient before, but he had a lesbian sister, so he got it. He said he thought of they, them pronouns as me being both male and female, containing multitudes. I didn't know how to tell him that to me it means absence, not abundance. We talked about how I averted my eyes from the Victoria's Secret on my walk home every morning, how even the lingerie form of the mannequins made me self-conscious. What a relief it was when I moved and my route changed. He too said that I had to talk about my boobs, trying to understand the extreme aversion that I couldn't explain. It had gotten worse the more I realized I was trans, or maybe I was just allowing myself to feel the discomfort. Trying to talk to him about my feelings, I had to muster all my strength to push past the W when saying I didn't want to be seen as a woman. But every time I tried to say breast or boob, my tongue autocorrected and it activated myself saying chest instead. I was baffled by my own prudish proclivities. I never felt uncomfortable seeing a woman's body in the gym locker room. I never cringed in drawing classes in the art students league while carefully charcoaling a nipple. But saying boob aloud felt like lifting my shirt and saying, look, I have them too. As Lavery wrote, I felt like publicly admitting to having a body, an act so embarrassing I have still not fully recovered. Lavery and I may be mortified by our corporeal forms, but not all trans people feel this way. My parents dropped me off at college the day I turned 18. I met Art 2 days later, but they always say that we met on their birthday. We had a conversation in the first week of our friendship about gender. Neither of us had really been aware of trans identity and were shocked by the gender fuckage around us. We were both very cis and very straight, except we desperately wanted to be boys for a large part of our childhoods. They had stuffed underwear with a pair of socks in first grade. I quit dresses at 7 and swore to never go back until I caved to the pressure to fit in middle school. We had both been tomboys who knew that growing up involved giving up the boyishness. We believed that gender had to be sorted by high school and were shocked that at college, students were still figuring out their genders around us. About 2 weeks later, my friend Mo burst into our dorm, nearly crying with laughter. She was getting breakfast when Artie walked into Klein, the dining hall, with one tit fully out of their button-down shirt. Mo had rushed to tuck it away, with Art barely phased by the nip slip. Artie is a performer. If you did theater at Bard College, you invariably got nude in public. They posed naked for a painting in my dorm kitchen and on extra-long twin beds for other friends' drawings. The wine-red birthmarks splashed across their left breast became deeply familiar. They existed in their body without apologizing for it. We graduated college in 2017 and came out as non-binary to each other within the year. My chest looked like a misprint to me. I could just see what I was supposed to look like, but there was this excess tissue in the way. When When I looked at my chest, I thought of this radio story my family had heard driving back from my grandparents' house when I was a kid. A fat man was taking a woman on a date in the park. He described holding a large knife about to slice a watermelon when he was struck with the idea of slicing off his stomach. It would be so easy, a clean cut, in his contemplation, bloodless. We got home before the story ended, so I'm not sure if he found acceptance or if she fell in love with him despite his size. It was the early aughts, and despite was the only way to love a fat person back then. The image imprinted in my mind, I could picture the ease of slicing through the real me. When I confessed this image to Artie, they said they've always felt more like a Mr. Potato Head. They pictured parts that just could be popped off and rearranged. They liked the option. Maybe that's why they stuffed their underwear. They've always wanted more gender, more expression. The gender spectrum they exist on appears to have 3 poles: man, woman, and meme. Their fluorescent green mullet hair paired with matching fishnets and a crochet top, or their half black, half white mullet with bleached brows and the slouchy yellow nervous shirt, or their salmon pink mullet with the Steve Buscemi skirt I got them in a Nicolas Cage necklace. Their trans identity is powerfully their own, but when they came out, there was a small, resentful part of me that feared my gender would not be taken seriously along theirs. End quote. Sometimes I selfishly wish that everyone had the same free love, boundless approach that I have to my own gender, that H has described here. But if I'm being honest, I'm not sure I even see gender that way all the time. I know that I probably see gender very differently than most people, but I have a sneaking feeling that we all see it a little differently, which is why it's always astounded me that society has found a way to agree on so much on so little of a basis. I think drag is a wonderful example of this. One, because the art of it is taking delight in the extremes of the gender binary while at the same time pointing out the absurdity of it all. Drag queens, not always, but often, play on the extremes of femininity. The act of feminizing for drag queens often takes on the form of extravagance, something I personally love. To feminize yourself, one would put on makeup, pad out your curves, do up your hair, add glitter, add color, add drama. Of course, none of these things are inherently feminine, but in performance built on the extremes of gender, these seemingly innocuous connotations are powerful. Drag kings, with a capital K, have a sometimes more challenging role. To masculinize yourself usually means to become more subtle. And while drag kings rarely go sans makeup, the makeup takes on a form more of illusion to create strong jawlines, heavy brows, a square face, to deceive the viewer into believing the performer has traditionally male features. The fun colors and the glitter, the unique makeup looks aren't necessarily gone, but harder to work into your masculine persona. When it comes to clothing, the options for drag kings are again very limited. If your persona involves a parody of someone specific, a celebrity, or a time period, the chances are high that you will end up again in a boxy suit that unglamorously hides your curves. Drag kings or drag things, a QING, is a contraction of king and queen that non-binary drag artists often use to categorize their drag performance as something other than dressing in clothes and adopting mannerisms typically associated with the opposite gender, which posits the question, what is drag on a genderless body? What do you associate with women or with men? I'd like to open up the floor.
Adam's apples.
Adam's apples. With men?
With men.
With men. Anyone else?
The way they walk.
The way they walk. So with men, is it maybe a little boxy? No hip movement? Women, there's a little bit more hip movement? Anything else? What newspaper? Is that a boy or a girl thing? That's a boy thing, right? What about rom-coms? That's for girls. Yeah. I'm not trying to catch you or anything. I truly, maybe you think about this every day. like I do. Maybe you don't, and you're trapped in this conversation with me. But I have many connotations with men and women, much to the chagrin of anyone that I involve in this conversation. I think we all do deep down whether we acknowledge it. But what about ordering dessert? Is that a feminine thing to do? Yes. My mom says yes. Dessert is for the girls. That's what this Twitter user believes. I can't see the screen. Is it up?
Yes.
Amazing. Okay. One tweet bravely shares an opinion that a guy ordering dessert on a date is a red flag for me. That's a female thing to do for real. FR is short for real. You heard it here first. This might sound a little ridiculous to you, but even this claim can be backed up by popular media. The movie High School Musical, whether you've seen it or not, I'll give a quick recap. The butt of a joke is that one of the basketball players, traditionally a masculine activity, especially a boys' basketball team, has a side hobby of making creme brulee. And despite professional cooking and baking being a male-dominated industry, the fact that this masculine high school basketball player takes delight in making something as ridiculous, as feminine as creme brulee is hilarious. And why is it so hilarious for a man to do something we associate as feminine? One very obvious answer is homophobia. The original tweet, ordering dessert as a female thing to do, blew up with responses mocking the idea of fragile masculinity and homophobia by asking if everyday non-sexual acts are homosexual using the fellas is it gay Twitter format. So fellas, is it gay to order dessert? Fellas, is it gay to order sides? Fellas, is it gay to breathe? But I think there's another level to this brand of humor, which is also often the basis of such unchecked homophobia. Under a patriarchal society, it is to do something feminine as a man is a demotion, while to do something manly as a woman, although it might not be seen as wanted or natural, is still a promotion. In this sense, a very traditionally feminine woman enjoying basketball, hunting, or other traditionally masculine activities wouldn't be nearly as funny as Zeke, this masculine basketball player making a creme brulee and delighting in it. Women wearing pants is powerful, but men wearing skirts is either hilarious, the premise of a mistaken identity play, or incredibly brave and applauded. Innocuous things associated with femininity are seen as weakness, while similarly innocuous things associated with masculinity are seen as powerful. And if you already hold the power of manhood, diminishing yourself to this weakness of femininity is a form of self-deprecation humor. So, if dessert is for the girls, what is for the boys? Let's take a second. I won't make you say it out loud, but maybe think of something inside your head. What is for the boys? The color blue? Heist films? Maybe your definitions aren't so arbitrary and are supported by history, business, war, science. Mud? I agree. Mud is for the boys. Another popular meme format is the girls versus boys meme format, also known as boys are quirky, which refers to a genre of memes based on the perceived behaviors of boys and girls in various scenarios. The trope gained popularity in May 2019, moving to TikTok in 2020 with variations that compared locker rooms, sleepovers, puberty, masturbation, lunch tables, and reactions to wearing the same outfit or when the teacher says to leave class. The joke, often given with irony, is that the girls' version takes itself very seriously, be it aesthetically, dramatically, or doing as one would expect. The boys' version, however, is wild, funny, unexpected, quirky, or even wholesome compared to the girls' version. Examples are on the screen. Before I began to explore my own gender, these kind of jokes infuriated me. Why couldn't girls be funny, wild, gross, or have unexpectedly wholesome friendships? The answer I eventually found is, of course, girls can and are all of these things. But there's something joyous about assigning behaviors to the extremes of the gender spectrum at random, as if it validates how arbitrary these things actually are in our world. I think that's part of the reason our culture is obsessed with drag. And not just RuPaul, not even LGBTQ drag culture, but Mrs. Doubtfire, Some Like It Hot, Tootsie, She's the Man, Is He Dead Yet? I could go on. Drag often embodies the extremes of the gender spectrum, and we enjoy the performance of these extremes, sometimes because we seek to emulate it, sometimes we want to be able to separate ourselves from it, because the truth is that gender has always been a spectrum. For girly girls to tomboys, macho men, not real men. Those are terms used by the cis community to express their own versions of their own gender variance. And I apologize for all the meme talk. I believe that we are inherently digital creatures in this day and age. As Donna Haraway of the Cyborg Manifesto says, the cyborg is a creature of a post-genderless world. Feminists have argued that the assignment of gender roles is arbitrary for some time now. Simone de Beauvoir says, "It is perfectly natural for the future woman to feel indignant at the limitations posed upon her by her sex. The real question is not why she should reject them. The problem is rather to understand why she accepts them." And more recently, some cis people have come to acknowledge that the expression of gender isn't confined to a binary, but neither is the biology behind sex. In a high school level biology, we learned that biological sex is made up of a few different things: sexual organs, visible sex characteristics, chromosomes, and hormones. The assignment of sex, and often of gender as well, onto a baby is typically based off of genitalia. The binary model of biological sex assumes that individuals have either ovaries or testes. However, there are intersex conditions in which individuals have ambiguous or mixed gonadal tissue, such as ovotestes. Still, these babies are often assigned one sex over the other and sometimes forced to undergo surgery to align their body with that assigned sex. The binary model of biological sex is based on the presence of XX or XY chromosomes. However, there are genetic variations that can result in individuals having a combination of sex chromosomes, such as XXY, XXX, or XYY. And individuals with an androgen insensitivity syndrome may have female external genitalia despite having XY chromosomes. And while the presence of certain hormones, such as testosterone or estrogen, is often associated with male or female sex, the levels of these hormones can vary widely among individuals and may not always align with the typical male or female levels. Not to mention how birth control, steroids, and even soy products affect our hormone levels well after birth. And once these babies grow up, their physical sex characteristics aren't guaranteed to align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. Many cis women have flat chests, grow facial hair, are taller than their male assigned peers, who may have a slim waist, narrow shoulders, very little body hair, and retain fat more easily. Even after all of these variables, what exactly is binary about sex? There's been an additional binary created between biological sex, which is scientific, and gender expression, which is cultural, and developed words like AFAB, which stands for assigned female at birth, or AMAB, assigned male at birth, which can be useful, but sometimes people use them interchangeably with our preconceived notions of sex. Not all people assigned male at birth have a penis. Not all people assigned female at birth can have an abortion. And not everyone who doesn't fit the characteristics of the sex they were assigned at birth are trans. I believe that the binary between sex and gender is as fluid as the gender binary. There is not a strict binary between preferred and assigned because, as I just described, sex assignment is arbitrary like gender roles. To default onto a more fluid understanding of identity being shaped by society, but leave science and biology in another world that is fixed, yet somehow unimportant to societal identity, is to undermine the complexity and fluidity of science. Judith Butler says, "If the immutable character of sex is contested, perhaps this construct called sex is as culturally constructed as gender. Indeed, perhaps it was always already, with the consequence that the distinction between sex and gender turns out to be no distinction at all." My bringing up Judith Butler is complicated. Judith Butler is where I first started to question the binary of gender and subsequently my own gender, but Butler has done things in recent years that I would never condone. And for that, I'll leave you to do your own research. But I would be a hypocrite if I were to say that the division between good and evil was drawn so easily. I was raised under the belief that there is no true evil and no true good. It was an actor's philosophy to try to understand the complex characters and treat everyone with empathy. That didn't stop any messaging from superhero movies, purity culture, and morality tales. There's something comforting in knowing that there's a bad guy out there and that it's not you or your loved ones. It's comforting to have control over your own evilness. I would think, and sometimes still do think, that people who say it's not so black and white are usually those who found themselves on the side of evil and have lost this comfort. The term purity culture, according to the author of Pure, is generally associated with white American evangelical Christian purity movement and the corollary purity industry launched in the early 1990s. However, evangelicals don't have a monopoly on the ethics that undergird purity culture. The specifics vary by religion and culture, but gender and sexual control upon which purity culture stands is global, cross-religious, and cross-cultural. In purity culture, gender expectations are based on a strict stereotype-based binary. Men are expected to be strong, masculine leaders of the household, church, and to a lesser extent, society. Women are expected to support them, to be pretty, feminine, sweet, supportive wives and mothers. Sexual expectations vary by gender. Everyone is expected to maintain absolute sexlessness before marriage. That means no sexual thoughts, feelings, or actions. And upon marriage, they are expected to flip their sexuality on like a light switch. However, men are taught that their minds are evil, whereas women are taught that their bodies are evil. That is to say, men's thoughts and actions are said to be either pure or impure, while women themselves are said to be pure or impure. Women as a whole. Sexual metaphors abound. A pure woman is compared to a brand new shiny car, while an impure one is compared to a used car that everyone around town has already driven and that isn't worth much anymore. A pure woman is compared to a delicious hamburger just set down on the table, while an impure woman is compared to the last slobbery bite of the hamburger, etc. Purity culture also teaches that women are responsible for the sexual thoughts, feelings, and choices men make, and so must dress, walk, and talk in just the right way, so as not to inspire sexual thoughts, feelings, actions in them. If they do inspire such thoughts, they're said to be a stumbling block, literally a thing over which men trip on their pathway to God. To avoid stumbling blocks, men are taught to train their minds using strategies such as bouncing their eyes when they see something that brings out a sexual thought or feeling, such as women's cleavage in an advertisement or the knee of a woman sitting beside them at church. Underlying these teachings are several assumptions, including those that the gender is a binary and that heterosexual desire is the only right and normal form of desire and sexual intercourse. The white American evangelical Christian purity movement is further based in nationalistic and white supremacist assumptions. As a result, purity culture influences people's lives in complex ways, resulting in highly intersectional marginalization. For example, whereas white American women may feel they must unfairly maintain the purity they are assumed to have been born with, American women of color, women from other cultures may feel that they must attain purity, as it is not something that they assume to have been born with and within the subculture. Purity culture is built on this idea of being tainted, and once tainted, one cannot be pure again. And it has created a binary of pure and impure that people cannot pass between more than once and sometimes not at all. I believe that consciously or unconsciously, our larger society, even those who don't associate it with purity culture or religion, has applied this idea to many parts of our lives. We apply this to the villains and heroes in our lives, to the villains and heroes in popular media. I myself found myself falling victim to this when Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt broke up. There was a kinship I instinctively felt with women who weren't immediately seen as sexy and or confident. I rooted for the Jennifer Anistons over the Angelina Jolies. It didn't matter who was right or wrong. Jennifer was just like me, She was a gorgeous, successful celebrity with a life I could never imagine. But she seemed nice, was demure even. Angelina Jolie was too beautiful, too sexy, too confident, so much so that I had to find things I didn't like about her beauty. She was too harsh, too skinny, too sexual. Her sexuality made it easy for her to fit into my box of evil, and her opponent, Jennifer, necessarily would go into the box of good. I also found myself very jealous of the way that we talked to little boys. Being raised a girl, I was often told, "You are so pretty, you are so good, you are so smart." And it felt amazing until one of those things was taken away from you for a split second. You failed a test, someone called you ugly, you do something bad, and then what is there to do? You've fallen from grace. The messaging little boys typically get is, if you would just sit down, you could learn this. They were offered a sense of autonomy, a challenge, and a prize. And of that, I was very jealous. We apply this to the archetype of the harlot and the wronged woman. We apply this to ourselves. We apply this to all sorts of identities, including disability. I'd like to read another excerpt from my friend H. Conley on their disability. Quote, "When I was in high school, a close friend told me I shouldn't call myself blind. She said that because I have vision, I'm not really blind. This sentiment has followed me throughout life. But blind was one of the earliest descriptions I had for myself. My brother and I both have, I forgot to practice this word, oculocutaneous albinism, a lack of pigment that causes visual impairment and puts us in the category of legally blind. We started wearing glasses as toddlers, but our vision is uncorrectable. My vision with glasses is similar to how many people who need glasses see without them. I appear able-bodied, unless you notice how large the font is on my phone, my zoomed-in computer screen, or my partner reading menus aloud to me. You wouldn't know I'm disabled. The fact that I'm high-functioning means that people throughout my life have assumed that calling myself blind is hyperbolic. Many people have asked me, how bad really is your vision? But I have only ever seen through my own eyes, so I really can't answer that question. I have had to come out as blind in every aspect of my life repeatedly. I've had to tell every teacher, professor, boss, friend, and coworker. I feel I have to say it up front because otherwise people assume I'm rude when I don't respond to waves. I've been scolded in movie theaters because a friend was whispering the subtitles to me and screamed at for not following directions on signs I can't read. My vision defines every aspect of my life, and yet, the longest time, I was plagued by not feeling blind enough. When I started to acknowledge the pain I felt regarding my gender, a similar feeling bloomed. I knew I wasn't a girl, and so I pushed myself to manhood. I categorized every aspect of myself into either masc or femme, and I was constantly tallying to reassure myself of my own masculinity. But I constantly wondered if I was trans enough. I used they, them pronouns because I knew no one would take me seriously as a man. I saw myself being non-binary as a stepping stone toward the real gender in my future. I believed in the gender spectrum in concept, but couldn't accept myself actually being in the amorphous middle. But in talking to my friends, reading and listening to the work of other trans people, I realized how I let myself be swayed by binary thinking. My vision has remained unchanged since childhood, and somewhere in the vast gap between good vision and no vision, I've never felt a need for more or less. After coming out, I was free from the barrage of misgendering and dead naming, and since other people were taking me seriously, it was much easier to take myself seriously. To believe that there is no need to force myself to one side or the other, that I can be happy in the ambiguity between binaries. These societal binaries, man versus woman, good versus evil, nature versus culture, have shaped our collective worldview in a powerful way. Even within the gender binaries, the binary of preferred versus assigned, a societal gender versus biological sex, but even biological sex is more fluid than the general public's understanding of it. So, what if everyone, whether they identify as trans, non-binary, cis, or other, understood gender as something that is not fixed, but is instead constantly being created through our interactions with each other? What if we applied this idea of gender to other binaries in life? What if our identity wasn't entirely innate or entirely performed, but something we build upon every day? What if these things we learn to be good or evil weren't truly one or the other, but simply actions with different consequences? What would happen if we broke down the binary between binary and fluid, but didn't let go of the extremes of the spectrum? It's clear that binaries serve a real purpose in our society, and a world without the extremes of any spectrum would be a gray dystopia. But while it's often fun to perform, the performance has a power over us, unless we honestly interrogate when there needs to be a line drawn and when it needs to be crossed.
Thank you, Art, for a very enlightening presentation. A few things. Remember to bring your hymnals back so we have some less work. And we'll have a gathering room, some refreshments, coffee. In about 15 minutes, we'll meet over here for talk back. Closing words. Between the dawn and the dusk of our being, let us be brave and loving. In our little passage to the light, let us sustain and forward the human venture in gentleness, in service, and in thought. Amen.
This morning, the postlude itself has been a little fluid because we were debating between technology and live performance. So Sarah finally set a parameter. We said live performance. So the final piece is Let All Things Now Living, which just felt like a really fitting piece with what Art has talked about. The line is, let all things now living the song of thanksgiving to source and creation triumphantly raise. And the last line is, as forward we travel from light into light.
Thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.